officials, quote, Turkish authorities have told the United States that Turkey has recordings now from inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul that provide evidence that Jamal Khashoggi was killed inside. NBC has not heard or seen the tapes yet, but this comes after the Washington Post reported, that the Turkish government says it has audio and video recordings. And that's according to U.S. and Turkish officials who say that the recordings show that a Saudi security team detailed Khashoggi in the consulate, then killed him and dismembered his body. The news now threatens to upend the administration's goal of a strategic alliance with Saudi Arabia. The Trump administration's relationship with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, whose rise to power was accompanied by a crackdown on his arrivals. Anyway, Jared Kushner in particular has courted the 33-year-old Crown Prince. According to the New York Times, Kushner once even hoped that the future king would put a Saudi stamp on approval on his Israeli-Palestinian peace plan. That was Jared's plan. Anyway, despite warnings of mounting evidence implicating Saudi Arabia, the president, that's Trump, tonight said he'll talk to the king soon and that nobody yet knows what happened.
Well, we're going to find out what happened with respect to the terrible situation in Turkey having to do with Saudi Arabia and the reporter. And nobody knows quite yet. Nobody's been able to put it all together. People are starting to form ideas, and as they're formed, we'll let you know. But it certainly is a terrible thing.
Was it a mistake for Jared to develop such a close relationship with the Crown Prince?
No, I don't know if it's any closer than other relationships that people have.
Well, joining right now from Istanbul is Richard Engel, chief foreign correspondent for NBC News, and Ruth Marcus. She's a deputy editorial, deputy editorial editor at the Washington Post. Richard, how is the world looking at this disconnect between the evidence coming from the Turkish government, which is gruesome and total, with apparently a audio tape of this killing, and our president's refusal to accept it, the fact?
Well, I think a lot of the world reaction has been similar to the way the world looks at President Trump from the beginning, that he is someone who values strong men, he is someone who values money, values trade relations, and tries not to cast any moral judgments and does not want morals to get in front of business interests. I think that is the way people look at it. There's some are scratching their heads, some think it's pragmatic, but they are not looking at it as the way they traditionally have seen the United States, which tries to present itself as a champion of human rights, not always very successfully. But we're learning tonight, and the Washington Post guest can elaborate more on this, is really a new take on what happened inside the Saudi consulate behind me. We know that Jamal Khashoggi was nervous about going inside this building. That's why he'd been living in exile. He knew he'd made enemies of the powerful Saudi crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman, often referred to by his initials, MBS. He was so nervous about going inside that he told his fiancée to stay outside with his phones and to call authorities should he not come out. And he didn't come out. But apparently that was not the only precaution that he took. A Turkish newspaper tonight, a pro-government newspaper, is reporting that he was wearing an Apple Watch and that he had set the Apple Watch, syncing it with one of his phones, to record, and that while he was inside, the phone was recording, uploading data to a server, and that he may have, through his cunning, recorded the interrogation, the beating, the torture, and ultimately his own murder, leaving behind the clues that Turkish investigators are now putting together.
Is that the source of the recording that the Turkish government has?
According to this one pro-government newspaper, which I must say has been pretty reliable. This pro-government newspaper has, throughout the past week and a half, been drip releasing information, tips about the timeline, about how 2 chartered jets arrived at Istanbul airport, how a convoy of vehicles came here to the consulate building, that they were very early on in quoting security sources saying that Khashoggi had been murdered inside. So their information has been consistent and proven out to be true and supported by other Turkish officials. It's possible that that is not where these recordings come from, but that's what they say they came from.
Well, hold on there, Richard. Let me go to Ruth Marcus. What's impressed me is the way, I think thanks to your newspaper and other journalistic organizations, the American people have taken up this cause. Jamal Khashoggi is felt at this point like he's one of ours, somebody who chose to live in our country, sought refuge in our country, worked for our country, reported for our country, and we feel like a kinship with him after his death, apparently. And I wonder if anybody thought like this in that part of the world, if they knew how much of an affront we were going to take here.
Well, we certainly think of Jamal Khashoggi at the Washington Post editorial page at the opinion section as one of ours. And I have to say the response of the American people, the response of our colleagues at NBC, MSNBC, and across the American media to this outrageous disappearance, and perhaps worse than disappearance, has been a really heartening aspect of a really terrible and tragic story. And I think that we know, the American people know instinctively, that people who criticize their government, whether here or abroad, are not enemies of the people, to use a phrase that people may recognize. They are acting out of love for their country. You read Jamal Khashoggi's op-eds for the Washington Post, you understand that this is a man who truly loved his country, wanted to get it on the right track, praised Mohammed bin Salman and the Saudi leadership when he thought they deserved praise, doing things like allowing women to drive or opening movie theaters, and also was fearless in criticizing them, a fearlessness that might have led to his murder.
Well, President Trump has long been a vocal advocate for better relations with Saudi Arabia. In fact, Trump chose Saudi Arabia as the first stop on his first foreign trip after becoming president. And he's consistently praised that country and its leadership since entering politics.
It's a great honor to have the Crown Prince with us. Saudi Arabia has been a very great friend and a big purchaser. The King of Saudi Arabia, who's a great guy, King Salman. Think of it. I have great friendships in Saudi Arabia. I have many friends that are Saudis. I see them all the time. I'm all for Saudi Arabia. I like the Saudis. They're very nice. I make a lot of money with them. They buy all sorts of my stuff, all kinds of toys from Trump. They pay me millions and hundreds of millions. Saudi Arabia. I love Saudi Arabia. The people are very nice to me. They buy my apartments. You wouldn't believe it. It's true. They'll pay me anything. They have nothing but money.
Richard, do the Saudis think they own Trump?
Well, they may have thought that, but I think what happened over the last couple of days here and the international reaction may prove that the Saudis, if in fact they were behind the murder or disappearance of Jamal Khashoggi, that they misread the situation. There has been a ferocious backlash. Turkey has been relentless in its leaks, telling reporters what happened, telling the media about what it says was a hit squad of 15 Saudis who arrived in this country, who came to the consulate and were waiting inside so that they could kill and then dismember Jamal Khashoggi. So if they thought they had Trump bought and paid for, and they thought that no one was going to react to this, then I think they were mistaken.
Richard Engel, you're the greatest. Thank you so much.